Raggi, she's a Swedish MP for the governing Social Democratic Party, by the author and commentator Douglas Murray. Welcome to you both. Leila Raggi, the Swedish political establishment was outraged by Mr. Trump's remarks, pointing to a migrant riot that hadn't taken place. And then a few nights later, serious riots did break out in a largely migrant suburb of Stockholm. So he wasn't far out, was he?
Oh, I think he was far out because he's misleading the public with how he uses the statistics. I think it's important to remember that the violence has decreased in Sweden for the past 20 years, and research shows that there is no evidence that indicate that immigration leads to crime. And so I think he's far out, and the social unrest in these different areas is not because of the ethnical backgrounds of these people living there, but more about socioeconomic reasons.
Okay, no evidence that migrants are responsible for any kind of crime wave.
Well, the problem about this story, if I can say so, it reminds me of what happened after the Charlie Hebdo and other terror attacks at the Jewish supermarket in Paris a couple of years ago, when, if you remember, also a Fox News commentator said something that was sort of outlandish about Paris, and the mayor of Paris threatened to sue Fox News, saying, you know, you're making our city look bad. It's a bit like that. We're sort of
why?
Because the truth on this lies between Donald Trump and the Swedish authorities on this. The Swedish government is very reluctant to admit to any downsides of its own migration policy, and particularly the migration it had in 2015. But there are very obvious, huge downsides, because Sweden, among other things, is not a country which needs an unskilled labour force, which doesn't speak Swedish.
What was raised is the matter of evidence. What is the evidence?
Well, first of all, if I can say so, the rape statistics in Sweden that have been cited are familiar with the rape statistics across other countries that have seen similar forms of migration. Danish authorities and the Norwegian authorities have recorded similar things, which is a very large.
They're not broken down by ethnicity, so we don't know.
This is part. This is part of the problem.
Well, let me get Leila Raggi to respond to that.
It's again a lot of.
This Swedish lady, a member of parliament, obviously a leftist, socialist, Marxist, whatever you want to call that, she literally has her head up her derriere. She really does. To try to tell, first of all, that she's saying that there's no studies that have cited that increase in migrant population, increase in illegal immigrants, increase in illegal aliens has no correlation to increase in crime. That's just freaking delusional, folks, okay? That's just an outright lie. And the Swedish authorities have done everything that other Western European authorities have done. They have basically told the public that, hey, there's nothing going on here. There's no ethnic rise in crimes. This isn't being committed by immigrants. We don't know who it is, because here's what they say. Somebody did something to somebody else at some place and it was a crime. They don't link it to ethnicity. They don't want to identify it. They don't want to be, you know, being accused of being xenophobic or racist or bigoted towards any group. The rape culture gangs that are occurring with these illegal migrants is unbelievably through the roof. And these women in these countries are facing this problem, and the authorities are doing absolutely crapola for it. Anyways, folks, we're going to get to more of the video here with Douglas Murray and this MP. But before we do, you're watching the Dr. Nasser Sheikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasser, where I give you my political prescription from my political perspective of what happens when things like this collide. Douglas Murray, this Swedish MP, we're talking about illegal immigration, illegal aliens, immigrants, asylums, culture, rape gangs, and they all come crashing together. Let's get back to more of the interview right now.
About when it's about, for example, rape that was raised here, it's difficult to compare the statistics, because in Sweden, for example, many crimes that in other countries are labeled as bodily harm or assault are in Sweden actually labeled as rape. Also how you count it, because if a woman goes to the police and report that her husband or boyfriend has raped her every night for 1 year, in Sweden that is counted as 365 offenses, while in many other countries it's counted as one.
You know, we can argue on the statistics, but something's going wrong. I mean, I look at the recent news from Sweden. 6 Afghan child refugees committed suicide in the last 6 months. Unemployment among recent migrants now 5 times higher than it is among non-migrants, 5 times higher. We've seen gang violence in Malmo, where a British child was killed by a grenade, rioting in Stockholm. The police in Sweden say there are now 53 areas of the country where it is now dangerous to patrol. Something's going wrong.
Let me get back to what I think is the core at this debate, if I may, and that is the right for people that are...
She doesn't want to answer that question. 53 areas, folks, that the police are saying are, places that you shouldn't travel to in Sweden? Sweden? Really?
Fleeing war and political persecution to seek asylum. That is a human right. And we in Sweden, we are not naive. We don't think that we can do everything. But we want to live up to our obligation, as every country has an obligation to receive asylum seekers.
The thing is, you've changed your policy.
No, it doesn't. Not every country has that right. The first right is to your own citizens first, and the safety and security of them first, honey. Let me mansplain that to you, just plain and simply, just put it right out there. The first obligation is to the nation and its citizens. The hell with everybody else first. You don't bring in problems. You don't bring in trouble seekers. You don't bring in illegal aliens. They're going to cause your citizens harm. That's not what you do. That's not the right. That's not why a nation is there for other nations. It's for itself first and foremost. And after that, you can decide what you want to do, but always with the safety and security and the concern of your own citizens. And if something doesn't meet those standards, you don't allow it to enter.
Policy on that, haven't you? Because having taken in 163,000 people in 1 year alone, you then closed your borders. I think very wisely, you closed the border, which was open, which meant that 10,000 people a day at one point were walking from Denmark into Malmo. You rightly changed that. So you've realized that whatever one's aspiration
Yes!
in the country in terms of asylum, it sometimes meets reality. And Sweden is now meeting the reality of this.
Absolutely.
And if I can just add...
Well, let's respond to that, then I'll come back to you.
We are not naive. We know that we cannot do everything,
You were naive
but
in
we want to
2015.
try to do our share, as we think that other countries also need to do their share. But also let me say that if you look what World Economic Forum is saying about our
my
country,
God.
they show that we are on the top of many rankings, the best country to live in, the best country to age in, the best country to have children in, the best country to start enterprising.
So why have you not been so good then, given all these numbers that you brought in integrating the refugees as they've come in? Now, let's come back to the unemployment rate, 5 times higher among migrants than among non-migrants, and that is the highest ratio of any country in the EU and the OECD.
Take
Why
that,
have you
honey.
not been able to integrate the people that you
Because
brought
you're
in for
morons and you're
humanitarian
idiots.
reasons?
That's why.
I'm sure that there are things that we can do much better, of course. But if you look, for example, at
stick with that one.
the
Yes.
immigration that came in the 90s from the Balkans, they're very well integrated. They are contributing to our society. They're starting enterprises. They are working in different fields of society, and they really helped our country.
Why have they not got jobs?
But they have got jobs. If you look at the
No, I'm talking about the migrants who came
But
in.
it takes time. It takes time with integration and establishment. And if we look at experience from the 90s, we managed it, and I'm sure we can do it again.
Can I just try to put this into some context, Douglas Murray? It is clear that Sweden has got problems as a result of the number of migrants that come in. Whether as bad as Mr. Trump or others make out is another matter. But perhaps I could just put it into a bit of context. Malmo, which has been at the epicenter
Yes.
of many of these migrant problems, its homicide rate is 3 per 100,000. Chicago, 28 per 100,000.
Sure.
It may have problems, but they're not huge.
No, they are pretty huge, and I think they'll grow. I mean, first of all, the Balkan refugees into Sweden in the 90s actually did bring a lot of problems with them. Sweden did, for the first time, see serious ethnic gang rivalries, as you know. There was an upsurge in gang-related violence that's gone on since. I would also add this: the situation in Malmo, in particular, it is exaggerated by some people. There's no doubt about that. I've been there many times. It's undoubtedly exaggerated by some. It's also vastly understated by the Swedish authorities. I come back to this issue, if I may. Take just before this recent influx. In 2010, 1 in 10 Jews in Malmo, of the remaining Jewish populations, registered some form of attack on them. It got so bad in 2010 that non-Jews in Malmo volunteered to escort Jewish people to services in Malmo because of the upsurge in anti-Semitism. And let me, one other very quick thing.
I mean, you've had a good say, and I've got to be fair here. Leila Naragi, what do you say to that?
I say that there are people trying to frame our country in a certain way to push their own agenda. I regret, for example, that President Trump is trying to slander our country.
No, I know you do that, but what's your answer to the specific point on Malmo?
I'm saying that if you speak to people in Malmö and also to different congregations, they say that themselves are working together with authorities to improve this. And I say again that there are a lot of people trying to spread rumors and lies that are not...
Your situation is very like the situation we had in Britain when we had these situations in Rotherham and elsewhere. 1,400 girls were raped in Rotherham before the authorities, by which I mean the local police, the local council and others, even admitted it was going on. That happened in Britain in the last decade. Similar phenomenon. An upsurge in particularly sexual and other forms of violence, and then total denial by an entire political class is now something, just as we had it in Britain, that is now happening in Sweden. I see it in Swedish authorities, I see it in the denial that comes out, I see it in the desire to laugh and dismiss Trump, but he's not on to nothing. And that is a very painful thing for any society to admit to, and I don't blame you for wanting to protect your society, but honestly, it's much easier to admit to it now.
There are a number of Swedes who think the establishment is covering up the true picture, that you don't issue the true statistics, you don't break crime down by ethnic lines. People are suspicious of the major centre-left and centre-right parties now in Sweden.
Absolutely.
But there is no denial and there is no cover-up. This is what I'm speaking about also when I'm saying that people try to frame it in a certain way. I would say that, for example, the social unrest in different areas, it's not because of the ethnical background of the people living there. It's rather because of different socioeconomic reasons and the conditions. There is no research that shows that immigration is...
But you don't do the research into that. The Swedish authorities deliberately ensure that you cannot carry out such research. And what's more, after the Cologne attacks in 2015, it was the first time after those in Germany, that the Swedish authorities and the Swedish press admitted that similar sexual molestation has been going on for years.
All right, let me ask you one part, because we're coming to the end of a fascinating debate. Is it right to think now that, given that the problems not maybe as bad as many people make out, but clearly problems, given these problems, is the age of mass asylum seeking for Sweden over? You've cut the numbers by over 80% coming in last year compared with 2015. Is it over while you concentrate in getting right the people that you have there already?
If everything was so great, honey, why is it that Sweden has cut their immigration rates by 80 to 90%. If everything is so freaking hunka-dory over there and everything is going great, why not show the world how great Sweden is in taking illegal aliens, taking immigrants from other cultures, other countries that will never integrate, never assimilate in Sweden? But why don't you show the world? Why don't you show the world how great you guys are doing so that we can copy the Swedish formula of incorporating the world into our bosoms of other nations?
We want to do our share, as we think that other countries should do their share. And we have done a lot, and now we are concentrating, of course, on integration and make sure that people get jobs, and also on big welfare investments, because it's important to remember that for 8 years, Sweden was governed by a government that prioritized big tax cuts instead of investment in welfare, and that is also the result we are seeing now in the social unrest.
You should also bear in mind the possibility that it just won't work. It may just not work.
We haven't got time to go into domestic Swedish politics.
Well, if there's anything we learned from this interview between Douglas Murray and this member of parliament in Sweden, is that the Swedes have their collective heads up their collective asses. Pretty simple to see here. This lady is the poster child for literally, just like an ostrich, sticking their head, and they're not sticking their head in the sand, folks. As I said before, they're sticking their head up their derriere, straight up their derriere, so much up their ass, through the intestinal tubes, up through the esophagus, that when they open up their mouth, you literally can see their head. That's how far up the rectum they are in terms of just basically shoving all of this stuff under the rug. She says the research doesn't show. If you don't give any data points, how do you do research? Amazing, folks, amazing. But you know what? If you're going to be idiots, if you're going to be morons, if you're going to be retards with policy, then you deserve every single thing coming to you. Unfortunately, the government and the elites up there usually don't have to suffer from this situation because they don't live in those areas. But the common people, the average Swedish citizen, has to live with the BS that's been created by the policies of the Swedish government because they want to do their share. They want to be the good nation of the world. Uneffing believable. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasser Shake Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasser. If you haven't done so already, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. If you found the content great and entertaining, take a look at our other videos above and below. Share your comments as well. We'd love to hear from you. My final thought, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.